The silence that followed was loaded with an almost palpable tension. Victoria Wellington was still for seconds that seemed eternal, her blue eyes turning into ice blades as she processed her husband's words. Elena remained exactly where she was, but something subtle changed in her posture, a silent determination that suggested that momentary victory was just the first movement of a much more complex match. "She stays," James repeated, her voice gaining more firmness with each syllable. "And Sophia too. It's our house, Victoria, not a stage for her social performances." The comment on social performances hit Victoria as a slap. For years, she had meticulously built an image of perfection through charity events, exclusive dinners, and carefully orchestrated social appearances. Being called a performic by her husband, in front of an employee, represented a humiliation she would never forget. "Very well," said Victoria, her voice low and controlled, but charged with a coldness that made the hall temperature seem to fall a few degrees. "But when it explodes in your face, and it will explode, don't ask me to fix it. And when the Rothschild ask why there is a sick child at our home during a charity event, you can explain your, humanitarian priorities yourself." Victoria turned abruptly, her jumps echoing through the marble with an intensity that revealed her contained fury. Before disappearing through the staircase, she threw a last poisonous look at Elena, a look that promised future consequences. Elena observed Victoria climb the stairs, and for a moment, an almost imperceptible expression crossed her face. It was not fear, no exaggerated gratitude for the protection of James. It was something more calculated, as if mentally writing down every word said, every reaction observed, every battle line being drawn at that time. "I'm sorry for that," said James, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of tiredness. "Victoria has been difficult lately. Social pressures, events. I think she forgot what really matters." "No need to apologize, Mr. Wellington," Elena responded softly. "I perfectly understand the lady's concerns. A house like this has her social responsibilities." There was a maturity in his answer that impressed James, the ability to maintain dignity even after being publicly humiliated. Sophia began to cough again, and James instinctively extended her arms. "Can I?" Elena nodded, carefully passing her daughter to him. The millionaire held the girl with surprising naturalness, remembering the early years of Marcus, when she still actively participated in daily care. "She has a fever," James watched, gently touching the little's forehead. "We have a family doctor. I can make a call." "It's very kind of your part, but it is not necessary," Elena has interrupted politely. "I already made an appointment for this afternoon at the health clinic. It's just a common cold." The difference between the worlds was clear in that answer. While James thought instinctively on private doctors and immediate care, Elena sailed through the public health system with the practicality of those who know their limitations and possibilities. "Elena," James said, your voice taking a more personal tone, "I would like to talk to you later about some changes I am considering making in the house. Changes that can benefit not only you but other employees as well." Elena tilted her head, studying him with new attention. "I will be available when you want, Mr. Wellington." The morning advanced with an underlying tension by going the entire mansion. Elena took care of Marcus and Sophia simultaneously, demonstrating an efficiency that transformed the presence of the sick daughter of problem into almost imperceptible addition to the routine. She knew instinctively when Marcus needed individual attention and when she could include Sophia in activities, creating moments where the two children naturally interacted. From the upper floor, Victoria watched through the huge glass windows, her cell phone constantly busy with calls to rearrange the details of the charity lunch. Each phone call carried additional tension, such as explaining possible domestic distractions, without admitting that he had lost an authority battle in his own home. "Mrs. Rothschild, Victoria Wellington, about today's lunch." "Yes, everything is perfect, just a few last-minute adjustments." Her voice kept the artificial sweetness characteristic, but whoever knew her would well notice the cracks on the facade. During the children's lunch, James appeared in the kitchen, a territory he rarely visited. Elena was sitting on the floor, Sophia on her lap taking a bottle while helping Marcus with her R effective. The domestic scene dramatically contrasted with the usual formality of the house. "Marcus, how are you feeling with Sophia here?" James asked his son, genuinely curious about the child's perspective. "She is tiny," Marcus responded with enthusiasm of a 4-year-old child. "Elena said that when she grows up she can play with me, and she has tiny fingers just like my toys." Children's innocence cut through all adult complications of the day. There was a 4-year-old who simply accepted the presence of another child as a natural and welcome, without the layers of prejudice and social expectations that complicated the vision of adults. "Elena," James said, sitting in a nearby chair, Can I ask a personal question? How did you keep that calm after what happened this morning? Elena looked at him for a moment, as if she evaluated how much she could share. Mr. Wellington, when you leave your country to build a new life, learn that each day is a test. Some days the test is difficult, others is just different. Today was a different day. The answer carried layers of meaning that James was just beginning to understand. Elena was not just a competent nanny. She was a survivor, a strategist, someone who had sailed by challenges much larger than a difficult morning in a Chicago mansion. There, as he watched Elena take care of 2 children with a competence that bordered the artistic, James began to realize that she had completely underestimated the woman who worked at her home 3 years ago. And more importantly, he began to suspect that Victoria had also made the same mistake, a mistake that could have consequences that neither was prepared to face. The Wellington family charity lunch was more than a social event. It was a power parade where Victoria showed her influence on the Chicago elite. Elena knew every detail of that ritual, having discreetly organized the last 3 similar events. He knew exactly which guests came first to impress, which wines would be served to show sophistication, and especially as Victoria would use every moment to solidify her position in the city's social hierarchy. Elena, I need you to keep the children completely invisible during lunch, Victoria ordered, her voice loaded with a calculated coldness. And when I say invisible, I mean that not even a whisper should be heard, especially of it. Victoria's finger pointed to Sophia, as if the baby were a bomb about to explode. Naturally, Mrs. Wellington, Elena responded with that calm that Victoria erroneously interpreted as submission. The children will be in Marcus's toy room throughout the event. But Victoria was not satisfied with just keeping Elena and Sophia hidden. There was something in Elena's attitude worthy during the morning confrontation that bothered her deeply, a serenity that suggested inner resistance, exactly the kind of thing Victoria had to completely destroy her absolute control over the house. Another thing, Victoria continued, her eyes shining with a particular malice. Today you will serve lunch. Sarah is unwell. It was a lie. Sarah, the usual employee responsible for event service, was perfectly well, but Victoria had planned this specific humiliation from the moment James challenged her authority. Elena immediately understood the trap. Serving lunch would mean being exposed to the most prejudiced guests of the Chicago social elite, carrying heavy trays as it took care of a sick baby simultaneously. It was a mission designated to fail spectacularly, providing Victoria the perfect justification for firing Elena for professional incompetence. I understand perfectly, Elena answered, her voice keeping the same respectful tone. But for an almost imperceptible second, something crossed his eyes. It was not fear or resignation. It was the look of someone who had just received exactly the opportunity he was waiting. At 11:30 a.m., the first guests arrived. Senator Mitchell and his wife entered the main door as if they were royalty, followed by the Rothschild family, whose comments on maintaining appropriate standards were famous in social circles. Victoria received them with calculated smiles and measured hugs. Elena remained in the toy room with Marcus and Sophia, watching the window of luxurious cars by the window coming to the mansion. Marcus played quietly, oblivious to adult tensions, while Sophia slept fitfully in her arms, still fighting fever. Elena, Marcus said suddenly, why was Mom shouting at you early today? The question hit Elena as a punch. Though the 4 years old, Marcus was too perceptive for his own good, capturing emotional nuances that adults would rather ignore. Elena knelt beside him, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes adults are worried when things don't happen as they planned, she explained softly. Your mom wanted it to be perfect today for your friends. From the bottom floor, the sound of animated laughter and conversations indicated that the event was fully operational. Elena could distinguish Victoria's voice dominating the discussions, probably sharing carefully rehearsed anecdotes about her impeccable life. At 12:15 p.m., Victoria appeared at the door of the toy room, accompanied by 2 elegantly dressed women. Ladies, this is ours. Domestic employee Elena, he said, carrying the words maids with a private disdain. Elena, these are Mrs. Rothschild and Mrs. Bennett. The 2 women observed Elena with that particular look of the elite, a clinical examination that evaluated social class, ethnic origin, and perceived value in seconds. Elena got up gracefully, Sophia still sleeping in her arms. It's a pleasure to know them, Elena said with genuine courtesy, her Philippine education showing through the natural dignity she was carrying. What interesting, Mrs. Rothschild commented, his eyes settling in Sophia. Victoria, you didn't mention that there were children, additional, in the house. It's temporary, Victoria responded quickly, her face blushing slightly. An emergency situation we are managing. Elena, Victoria said with a poisonous sweetness, Since you are here, how about helping with the service? You can leave this child in the crib and come to help us. It was the moment Elena had anticipated. Victoria was climbing the humiliation, forcing her to work as a waitress in front of Chicago's Plus guests as her sick daughter was alone on the upper floor. Of course, Mrs. Wellington, Elena answered calmly. I just need to check if Sophia is comfortable first. Elena descended the stairs with measured steps. Each set a small performance of dignity held under pressure. In the main hall, 20 of Chicago's most influential individuals talked excitedly, completely oblivious to the human drama that unfolded behind the scenes. Guys, Victoria has announced with a forced smile, our employee Elena will help us with the service today. The eyes that turned to Elena carried everything she had faced in the last 5 years in the United States, from paternalistic condescension to open contempt. But there was something different this time. Elena did not lower her eyes, no shrugging, showed no shame. Interesting accent, commented Senator Mitchell when Elena served her entry. Where are you originally? From the Philippines, sir, Elena responded clearly, not masking or exaggerating her accent. Of course, he nodded with that kind of superficial understanding that politicians dominated. You have an admirable service culture. The phrase, apparently a compliment, carried layers of racial stereotypes that reduced Elena and all her cultural heritage to a function of servitude. She smiled politely, but something behind her eyes hardened imperceptibly. As lunch progressed, the comments became more direct. Mrs. Bennett murmured to his table neighbor, loud enough for Elena to hear. It's impressive how Victoria can keep standards so high even with these staff limitations. Mr. Rothschild, already in the third glass of wine, was even more explicit. Victoria, where did you find this girl? She looks well-trained. We need to find one for our home at Martha's Vineyard. Each word was a brick on the wall of humiliation that Victoria was building, but Elena kept serving with a calm that was beginning to leave some guests slightly uncomfortable. There was something disturbing in the way she kept her dignity even under direct attack. From the upper floor, Sophia's crying lightly echoed by the mansion ventilation system. Elena paused imperceptibly, every maternal instinct shouting at her to climb and take care of her daughter. But Victoria intercepted her movement with a deadly warning look. Ignore, Victoria whispered venomously. Keep serving. It was at this moment that James Wellington entered the hall coming from a work call. He immediately noticed the tension in the air, the discomfort poorly disguised as some guests, and especially the distant sound of Sophia's cry from the upper floor. Elena, he said softly, shouldn't he be with Sophia? The hall silenced. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face when she realized that James had publicly questioned her arrangement. The guests watched the family drama unfolding before them with morbid fascination. James, Victoria said with a forced laugh, Elena is helping us as we match. The child is fine. But Sophia's cry intensified, and Elena could no longer keep the professional facade. Excuse me, she said calmly, and began to go to the stairs. Elena, Victoria called with authority. You are not dismissed. Elena stopped at the first step. She turned slowly, and for the first time that day, allowed some of her true strength to transpire in her voice. My daughter needs me, Mrs. Wellington. The service can wait. The hall was in total silence. 20 of the most powerful individuals in Chicago had just witnessed a Filipino nanny publicly challenged one of the city's most feared social matriarchs. Victoria felt her carefully constructed control world start to crack, and Elena, climbing the stairs with firm steps, knew she had planted the first seed of what was coming. Every tolerated insult, every look of absorbed contempt, every moment of calculated humiliation, everything was being carefully filed for the appropriate time. Victoria Wellington had just provided all the necessary ingredients for her own destruction, and Elena was exactly the right person to orchestrate this fall in a way they could never predict. That night, after putting Sophia to sleep in the small apartment she shared with another Philippine family, Elena opened her laptop, an old but functional model. What Victoria Wellington did not know was that her simple nanny had graduated in business administration from the University of Filipinas, one of the most prestigious in the country, before immigrating to the United States. For 3 years working at Wellington Mansion, Elena had observed much more than it seemed. Each whispered telephone conversation, every document left carelessly on the table, each bank transaction discussed during dinners, everything had been mentally catalogued by someone trained to analyze financial patterns and corporate behaviors. Rosa, Elena called her partner, who also worked as a maid in rich families of Chicago. I need you to do me a favor tomorrow. It's about the Wellington. Rosa Delgado, 35, had worked for 8 different families in the last 10 years. If there was something that Chicago's Philippines knew how to do, It was to exchange crucial information about their employers. It was an invisible protection net, where warnings about abusive bosses circulated rapidly among the workers. "Is Victoria Wellington causing problems?" Rosa asked, already anticipating the answer for Elena's serious tone. "She made a mistake today. A big mistake," Elena replied, her fingers dancing over the keyboard. "And when people like her make mistakes, others like us need to have proof." What Elena discovered in the coming hours of online research surprised her even. The beneficent Wellington Foundation, officially dedicated to promoting educational opportunities for needy communities, had received more than $2 million in donations in the last 2 years. But by crossing public data with information that had observed discreetly in the house, Elena realized something extraordinary. Only 12% of the money actually reached the charitable projects announced. The rest disappeared into administrative costs and specialized consultancies, companies that, curiously, had identical addresses to Victoria's private office. It was a sophisticated scheme of money laundering disguised as charity, allowing the Wellington to deduce taxes as they diverted funds to personal accounts. "God of heaven," Elena murmured, saving screenshots from every public document she found. His finance formation allowed him to see the connections that amateur researchers never perceived. But Elena knew that public data would not be enough to destroy a family with the Wellington power. She needed something more direct, more personal, more devastating. And it was then that he remembered the conversations that he had heard Victoria with his sister Patricia during home lunches. Patricia Morrison was married to Senator Robert Morrison, the same man who had humiliated Elena at today's lunch. The two sisters used to discuss strategic investments whenever Patricia visited the mansion. Elena had never paid full attention on these conversations so far. "Rosa, have you ever worked for any Morrison family?" Elena asked suddenly. "Patricia Morrison? Of course, I worked for her for 6 months last year," Rosa replied, lifting her eyes from the soap opera she watched. "Why the question? Have you kept anything from there? Photos, documents, anything that could be interesting?" Rosa smiled with malice. The after years being treated as an invisible furniture by rich families, the Philippines had learned to protect themselves. "Elena, honey, I have photographs of documents that would make the FBI babear. Patricia Morrison is more careful than a 5-year-old. What Rosa showed Elena on her cell phone screen was better than any Christmas gift. Clear bank transfers photographs between Morrison and Wellington accounts, values that coincided exactly with government contracts that Senator Morrison had approved at the time. It was direct evidence of bribe and political corruption. "How much do you want for these photos?" Elena asked, already knowing that Rosa would understand the importance of what she had. "Nothing," Rosa responded with a vengeful smile. "Patricia Morrison fired me after her teenage daughter tried to accuse me of stealing a necklace they later found in her boyfriend's car. Consider it a favor between sisters." Elena spent the dawn organizing everything she had collected: financial documents from the falsely charity foundation, photographs of bribery schemes, and a detailed chronology of each humiliation she had suffered, including names and dates. But his administration experience told him that a crucial piece was still missing: a way to deliver this information that had maximum public impact. It was then that Elena remembered Marcus, the young son of the Wellington. During his care hours, the boy often played with his mother's tablet, always unlocked and full of conversations on WhatsApp, personal emails, and social networks. A 4-year-old child could obviously not be able to read that content, but a management-trained nanny could memorize a lot. The next morning, Elena arrived at Wellington Mansion with Sophia in her arms, just as the day before. But this time, there was something different in his eyes, a silent confidence of those who were no longer defensive, but leaving for the attack. "Good morning, Mrs. Wellington," Elena said politely when she finds Victoria in the kitchen, having her usual breakfast. Victoria ignored her completely, demonstrating that the humiliation of the previous day had only intensified her contempt. "Keep this child away from the guests today. I have an important meeting of the Charitable Foundation Council at 2 a.m. "Of course, ma'am," Elena replied, internally smiling when he heard the word foundation. "Can I ask if there is anything specific that you would like me to prepare for the meeting? Maybe any financial report?" The apparently innocent question made Victoria stop chewing for a second. "Why would you ask about financial reports?" His voice carried a subtle suspicion. "I just thought I could help with the organization, as I always do," Elena responded with humility studied. "In the Philippines, I worked with administrative documentation. I know how to keep everything organized and confidential." Victoria relaxed, interpreting the offer as another demonstration of subservience. "It will not be necessary. Just stay busy with the children and away from the meeting room." "Of course, ma'am." Elena nodded, but inside celebrated. Victoria had just confirmed not only the meeting about the foundation, but also that there would be sensitive documentation in the house that afternoon. While Victoria was getting out and shopping before the meeting, Elena took the opportunity to execute the first part of her plan. With Marcus entertained watching cartoons and Sophia sleeping, she discreetly photographed the family's calendar in the kitchen, which not only detailed today's meeting but future meetings with names she recognized for bribery documents. At 11 a.m., Elena received a message on her cell phone of an unknown number. "Hi Elena, I'm Daniel Chen, an investigative journalist for Chicago Tribune. An anonymous source said you could have important information about local political corruption. Can we talk?" Elena smiled. Rosa had fulfilled her part of the agreement, contacting a journalist known for exposing corrupt politicians' scandals. "I can talk at 6 p.m. today. I have a lot to show you," she replied. The rest of the morning passed in silent preparation. Elena knew she only had a chance to perform her plan perfectly. Any error would mean not only their resignation, but possibly legal retaliation of Wellington against a maid that spied on employers. At 1:30 p.m., members of the Charitable Foundation Council began to arrive. Elena recognized some faces of lunch from the day before, people who had made degrading comments about their origin and competence. Now, watching the window, she saw these same people actively participating in a scheme that stole money for needy communities just like hers. Elena, James Wellington. It appeared in the kitchen, looking more casual than in previous days. "Could you serve coffee and water for the meeting? Victoria is busy." "Of course, Mr. Wellington," Elena answered, her heart accelerating. This was the opportunity you had expected, direct access to the meeting room where compromising documents would be openly discussed. While preparing the coffee tray, Elena verified discreetly if her cell phone was configured to record audio. In a few minutes it would be in the same room as some of the most corrupt individuals of Chicago, and every word they said would be documented. "Is Sophia okay today?" James asked, noticing that the baby seemed to alert more. "Much better, thanks for asking," Elena replied, played by his genuine concern. For a moment he almost felt bad about including James in the destruction that was about to orchestrate. Almost. Carrying the tray towards the meeting room, Elena took a deep breath. In his bag, his cell phone recorded silently. In his mind, every financial detail that he had memorized for the past 3 years has organized himself as pieces of a puzzle about to be assembled. Victoria Wellington and her accomplices had no idea that the simple Philippine nanny she despised was about to destroy her lives with the same administrative accuracy she used to take care of children. The game had changed, and Elena was finally ready to show who really controlled the pieces on the board. Elena entered the meeting room carrying the coffee tray with the same discreet elegance she had developed in the last 3 years. The 5 members of the Charitable Foundation Board were sitting around the mahogany table, scattered documents, completely opened in discussions about resource optimization and strategic background. "Ah, perfect," Victoria said, without even lifting her eyes from the papers. "Elena, leave the coffee there and can withdraw." But Elena didn't come out. Instead, it served each cup methodically, positioning itself strategically so that your cell phone, discreetly supported by the tray, capturing every word of the conversation. What board members did not know was that Elena perfectly understood every financial term she used. Her administration formation made every transparent euphemism. "As you can see in the report," Mr. Rothschild explained, pointing to a spreadsheet, "we were able to reduce direct operating costs to only 8% of the total raised this year. The rest was efficiently relocated to organizational development." Elena almost choked. Organizational development was code for their own pockets. In 3 years observing these meetings, she had seen the scheme evolve from minor deviations into a money laundering operation that stole millions for needy communities. "Excellent work," Senator Morrison commented, signing a document. "My approval of government contracts for educational consulting is guaranteed for the next quarter. We can expect another $1.5 million in spontaneous corporate donations." The arrogance was impressive. There were some of Chicago's most powerful individuals openly discussing bribery and fraud, completely convinced that they were untouchable. Elena continued to serve coffee, invisible as always, while her cell phone recorded every second of incriminating evidence. "Patricia will transfer funds through usual offshore accounts," Victoria added casually. "The new scheme with ghost companies on the Cayman Islands is working perfectly." Elena finally left the room, but not before hearing Victoria commenting, "At least we don't have that child crying around. These people really don't understand boundaries." In the hall, Elena took a deep breath. He had everything he needed, not just confessions of federal crimes, but clear evidence of racial discrimination and abuse of power. He verified the recording, 47 minutes of material that would destroy not only the foundation, but would end the political and social careers of all involved. At 6 p.m., Elena met Daniel Chen in a discreet coffee in downtown Chicago. The Tribune's investigative journalist was known for exposing political scandals, but even he was impressed with what Elena presented. "My God," Daniel murmured, flipping through the financial evidence Elena had organized. "This is pure political dynamite. Bribery, money laundering, charity fraud, and you have recordings of everything?" 47 minutes of explicit confessions, Elena confirmed, showing the audio file on her cell phone. "In addition to the photographs of the documents my friend Rosa collected at the Morrison house." Daniel shook his head, admired. "Elena, do you realize that you just gave me the biggest political corruption scandal that Chicago has seen in decades? Nador, destroying one of the most powerful families in the city and exposing a network of fraud that steals millions of dollars for education. And it will show the world how people like Victoria Wellington really think about people like me," Elena added, her voice loaded with a silent determination that had grown during years of humiliation. Daniel started calling immediately. "My editor will want to publish this tomorrow early, but Elena, are you ready for the consequences? Wellington will try to destroy you in every way possible." Elena smiled for the first time in days. "Mr. Chen, they have tried to destroy me. The difference is that now I have the tools to defend me." The next morning at 5:30 a.m., Chicago Tribune's headline exploded at the newsstands. "Billionaire scandal. Senator and social elite steal millions of educational funds." Daniel Chen's cover report detailed the entire scheme, with document photographs, recordings, and a complete fraud chronology. Victoria Wellington was drinking her morning coffee when James entered the kitchen with the newspaper in her hands, her face pale as paper. "Victoria," he said in a trembling voice, "we need to talk." She took the newspaper and felt the world crumble. His own voice was transcribed on the first page. "The new scheme with ghost companies on the Cayman Islands is working perfectly." Every word he had said at the secret meeting was printed in black ink, accompanied by detailed financial analysis that exposed the whole scheme. How did they get that?" Victoria stammered, her hands shaking as she read the evidence of her own crimes. "Elena," James said simply, "you completely underestimated Elena." Victoria then remembered the Philippine baby serving coffee at the meeting of the previous day, the woman she had humiliated, forced to work as a waitress, separated from her sick daughter, the same woman who now destroyed her with the surgical accuracy of someone who understood exactly how to expose corruption. The phone started to ring incessantly. Lawyers, public relations, members of the Panic Council. The kitchen TV showed reporters already gathered outside the mansion, cameras pointed at the windows where Elena had observed so many times the parade of luxurious cars. "Mrs. Wellington," a reporter shouted through the gate. "Comments on accusations of charity fraud and racial discrimination?" Victoria tried to call Patricia, but the line fell straight into the mailbox. Senator Morrison tried, the same result. In a matter of hours, she had become persona non grateful among the people she considered close friends. At 9 a.m., FBI agents knocked on the Wellington mansion door with search and seizure warrants. Elena watched from Marcus's bedroom window as men in suit were carrying boxes of documents outside the house where she had worked for 3 years. "Elena," Marcus asked, confused with all the movement, "why are there so many people here?" "Sometimes, Marcus," Elena explained softly, "when adults do wrong things, other adults need to come to correct. It's like when you do something wrong and need to learn from the consequences." James Wellington appeared at the bedroom door, seeming to have aged 10 years in one morning. "Elena, I need to apologize for everything, from what Victoria did, for what I allowed it to happen." Elena held Sophia firmer and looked at James with a mixture of sadness and satisfied justice. "Mr. Wellington, you defended me when you could, but defending is not enough when the entire system is corrupted. The press is asking for statements," James continued. "They want to talk to you." "I know," Elena answered calmly, "and I'm going to talk, because it's not just about me, or about Sophia, or about Victoria. It's about all families who have been harmed while these people stole money for education. It's about all domestic ones who are treated as invisible until they decide to become visible." From the bottom floor, the sound of Victoria crying echoed around the house, not of regret but of pure self-pity for losing her social position. Elena had heard that same tone when Victoria couldn't get the tables she wanted at exclusive restaurants. "Elena," James said, her voice breaking slightly, "what will happen to us now?" Elena looked out the window, where reporters were waiting for her statement, where evidence of years of corruption were carried by federal agents, where the community would finally see justice being made. "You will face the consequences of the choices they have made, Mr. Wellington, and I will guarantee that Sophia grows in a world where people like your wife can no longer destroy lives' impunity." The Philippine baby shaft that had been humiliated by its origin, forced to serve racist guests and separated from her sick daughter, she was now about to give the press conference that would turn the case into a national symbol of how corruption and prejudice can be defeated by the intelligence, preparation, and courage of those who refuse to remain invisible. 6 months after the scandal that shook Chicago, Elena Reyes was sitting on her new firm on the 15th floor of a commercial building in the city center. Through the wide window, I could see Wellington Mansion in the distance, now with a for sale sign that had remained for months without stakeholders. The transformation in your life had been extraordinary. What began as a simple search for justice became something much bigger. Elena had become a national symbol of resistance against corruption and prejudice, inspiring immigrant communities across the country. "Mom, look," Sophia, now almost 2 years old, ran through the office holding a drawing she had made in the corporate daycare center of Elena's new company. The little one, which was once treated as inconvenient by Wellington, was now growing in an environment where he was celebrated and loved. Elena Reyes Consulting had become one of the most respected corporate transparency companies in the country. Large corporations hired her to audit her internal practices and prevent corruption scandals. Ironically, the knowledge Elena acquired by analyzing Wellington's flaws turned her into a specialist sought by companies who wanted to avoid the same destination. "Elena has an important call to you," said Marcus. Yes, the same 5-year-old Marcus Wellington who was visiting Elena regularly. After Victoria's divorce and arrest, James had been able to keep her son and had a respectful relationship with Elena, recognizing that she had saved her family from a corruption that would eventually destroy him. The connection was from the University of Chicago, offering Elena a chair in business ethics. "Teacher Reyes has a good sound," she thought, smiling as he remembered when Victoria called her simply a domestic employee. Across the city, Victoria Wellington lived a completely different reality. The small apartment he had managed to rent after losing the mansion brutally contrasted with the luxury life he had met. Without access to the fraggled accounts by the federal court, he worked half a time in a department store. The irony of serving customers who were once his social subordinates did not go unnoticed. "Victoria, I need you to rearrange the stock of the children's sector," said his supervisor, a 30-year-old woman who had no idea who Victoria had been. The former socialite nodded silently, carrying boxes of clothing for babies, a constant reminder of the child who had despised and ended up being the catalyst of his fall. Patricia Morrison, Victoria's sister, had been sentenced to 8 years in prison for political corruption. Senator Morrison had lost not only the position but also his wife, who publicly asked divorce to try to save his own reputation. The corruption network that seemed invincible completely collapsed, and each person who had humiliated Elena in that charity lunch now faced devastating consequences. Elena welcomed Daniel Chen, the journalist who had exposed the scandal, in his office for a follow-up interview. "Elena, when you look back, regret something?" he asked. "Just taking so long to act," she responded honestly. "For 3 years, I witnessed injustices thinking it was not my place to intervene. Today I understand that when we witness evil and are silent, we became accomplices." Rosa Delgado, who had provided the crucial photographs, now worked as Elena's executive assistant. Together, they had created a protective network for immigrant domestic workers, offering legal support and guidance for those facing discrimination or abuse. "Do you know what impresses me most?" Rosa commented, organizing the files of new cases that arrived daily. "We always knew we were smart and capable. The problem was never our competence, it was the blindness of those who were superior." Marcus was still visiting Elena regularly, and she had become a maternal figure for the boy, complementing the care that James now offered as a present father. The child did not completely understand what had happened to his mother, but grew in an environment where diversity and respect were fundamental values. "Elena," Marcus said during one of your visits, "my father said you saved our family. How did you do that?" Elena knelt at the boy's height, choosing careful words. "Marcus, sometimes people do wrong things because they think no one is paying attention. I just showed the world what was happening. Very large power." James Wellington had rebuilt his life impressively. After cooperating in full with federal investigations and witnessing against corruption schemes, he managed to avoid criminal accusations. He sold all luxury goods, donated much of the money to legitimate charity organizations, and now worked as a business recovery consultant, helping companies in crisis rebuild their reputations. "Elena," James said during a visit to her office, "I want you to know that her courage not only exposed corruption, she showed me the man I had become and gave me a chance to be someone better." The impact of the case Elena Reyes extended far beyond Chicago. Universities included the study of the case in business ethics curricula. Documentaries were produced. Elena was invited to lecture at international conferences on corruption and rights of immigrant workers. When I received that first humiliation, Elena said in a UN lecture on workers' rights, I had two choices: silently accept or use my education and experience to seek justice. The difference between being a victim and being a survivor is in our refusal to accept that the world cannot change. The hearing, made up of diplomats and human rights activists around the world, offered a foot ovation that lasted 5 full minutes. Victoria Wellington, watching the broadcast of the lecture of the small television of her apartment, hung up the device angry. Even after 6 months, he could not accept that he had been defeated by someone he considered inferior. His arrogance remained intact, even in defeat, proof that some people never learn. In the nursery where Sophia spent the days, the little girl played with children of various nationalities, growing in a world where diversity was celebrated, not feared. Elena watched through the classroom window and smiled, knowing that her daughter would never live the prejudice she had faced. Do you know what was my biggest victory? Elena said Rosa as they walked through the office at the end of another productive day. It was not destroying Victoria Wellington. It was to build something she could never have imagined. A life where my origin is my strength, not my weakness. The latest news about Victoria Wellington had been her failed attempt to write a memories book. No publisher showed interest in publishing the version of a woman convicted of corruption who still refused to accept responsibility for her actions. Elena looked at the framed photo on her table. She and Sophia, on the graduation day of her executive MBA, which she had completed as she built her company. Beside, a letter of thanks from a young Honduran immigrant who had achieved justice against an abusive employer with the help of Elena's protection net. Sophia, Elena said, lifting her daughter on her lap to watch the sunset through the office window. One day you will understand that the best revenge is not to destroy who harms us. It is to build something so beautiful and significant that they realize how small have always been. Little Sophia bouncing something that sounded like strong mom. And Elena smiled, knowing that she had created not only a prosperous company, but also a legacy of courage that would inspire future generations of immigrant women to never accept less than they deserve. Victoria Wellington tried to destroy Elena for prejudice and arrogance, but eventually provided her with all the tools needed to build an empire based on justice and integrity. Elena learned that true revenge is not to return the damage suffered. It is to achieve the success that her enemies could never imagine, turning pain into purpose and humiliation into strength. If this story of overcoming injustice has inspired you to never give up on adversity, subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove that sometimes the biggest challenges are just disguised opportunities to show what we really are capable.